Perfect. There we go.
All right, we're ready to roll. Again, my name is Michael, and we're Lincoln Finance Group to talk to you a little bit about resumes. We'll move on to.
Go ahead. Oops, sorry.
All right, just as an overview to give you guys a little bit of a heads up of what we're going to talk about today, we're going to start out with sections of a resume. So we're going to break down section by section, going through the header, the actuarial exams, your education, your professional experience, your other leadership experience, so the activities you were involved with on campus, or other leadership opportunities, and then the optional sections on a resume. And then after that we'll go through and talk about resume writing tips, your word choice in a resume, and then we'll go through and do a resume comparison. So we're going to take an example of what we would probably consider a bad resume, and then we'll show kind of a side-by-side comparison of how we can improve that and make that a good resume. And then at the end we'll save some time for questions. So if you guys have any questions about anything we talked about today, we can go over that at the end. So with that, we'll move on to the first part of our sections of the resume, and that's going to be the header. Now in the header, there aren't too many main things that need to happen in here. Mostly you need your name, and now with the name, make sure it's the name you want to go by. So if you have a nickname or something, a shortening of name in any way, shape, or form, and that's what you want to go by, that's the name that should go on your resume. Just make sure that the nickname itself is professional. Make sure to add an address, and that can be permanent or local, whichever you prefer. Then add a phone number, and then a professional email address. You want to make sure that you portray yourself in a professional manner on your resume, and the header is one of the first things that's seen. It's right at the top, so you want to make sure that that email address that you put up there is professional. And with that, we'll move on to the next section, and that's going to be your actuarial exams. And of course, we all know actuarial exams are very important, so it's definitely something that should be very prominent and well seen on your resume. So the things that you want to include on this, the first is your past exams. So with the exam passing, you want to note next to that, the month and the year that the exam was taken. You also might want to note if it was a preliminary pass. If you got the computer-based testing results and but you haven't gotten the official score yet, you may want to put preliminary pass next to the exam that you sat for. And I will note that you do not need to list exam scores. Companies, aren't really looking for the specific score. A pass is a pass. In our eyes, a 6 is, as good as a 10. And the next thing you're going to want to list are future exams. So if you plan on sitting for an exam in the next 6 months, or you started studying for an exam, or you've signed up for an exam, let us know. So make sure you list the month and the year that you're going to plan on sitting for that exam too. But it's good to know it shows initiative, and it shows that you're taking the time to take the drive to sit for another exam. But make sure there's no need to list more than one of those. Don't list the next 6 exams you're planning on taking, because it's not necessary. The last thing that we wanted to note on the actuarial exams portion are the VEE courses. And so a great example of just a one-line statement that you can use to note that you have all the VEE requirements from your college or university is to say something like, all VEE requirements to be completed upon graduation. It's a short, simple, and sweet way to say, you know what, I took the initiative, I have all these classes, they're going to be complete, and when I graduate, I'll have this requirement completed. With that, we'll move on to the next section, which is education. So the first thing I want to note before I talk about what's listed here is you do not need to talk about your high school experience or your high school education on this portion of your resume. You're really going to want to focus on just the college or university that you attended. So that being said, the first bullet that we have listed here is, list the college or universities that you attended. On top of that, you're also going to want to list the dates that you were in school, and we have an example of how you could lay that out if you're still in school. You're going to want to list your majors and minors, your anticipated graduation date, and then GPA. And we have quite a bit here for GPA. And we also have in parentheses here if it's greater than a 3.0. I will say make sure this is easily visible. You want to make sure this is bolded, underlined, highlighted in any way, shape, or form to make sure that we can see this, because this is something that we really do look at. You know, when people are looking at resumes, they are looking for your GPA. Now, I noted that, you know, you should list it if it's greater than a 3.0 as well. Let's say your cumulative GPA is less than a 3.0. We have some solutions to maybe help you out with still trying to sell yourself. Let's say you had a really bad freshman year in college, but you've really improved, and so your junior-senior GPA, you know, is a 3.3. You know, down below that bullet point here, we have a couple ways or a couple of things that you can list here to really help you, you know, kind of try and sell yourself. So you could say something to the effect as cumulative GPA 2.8, but your actuarial science or your major GPA is a 3.5. That's going to tell us that, you know, maybe you had a couple, you know, slip-ups throughout college, but, you know, you really took your actuarial classes very seriously. Same with your junior-senior GPA, because, you know, those are usually the, you know, classes that they're more advanced or more difficult. And if you're showing that, you know, you took the initiative to really improve and build up your GPA, that's very helpful for us to see too. Now, the last section here, and it's listed as optional, is relevant courses. So, you know, maybe a theory of interest course or statistics, you know, it's going to be something that if you have, you know, a full resume, it may not be necessary, but it may be a nice section, especially if you're not an actuarial science major and you may not have the specific courses leading to this, you know, exams. So, and Tiffany, I'll hand it off to Tiffany a little bit. She's going to talk to you guys a little bit more about how to sell yourself if you don't have necessarily like an actuarial internship, but you know, if you have relevant coursework that can lead into professional experience, something along those lines. And so that would be a good reason to add, you know, the relevant courses on your resume. But with that, I'm going to hand it over to Tiffany to talk about professional experience.
Okay, thanks, Michael. All right, so a professional experience. This is job history. So full-time jobs, internships, summer jobs that you only had for a month. These are the types of things that we put in this section. If you don't have any job experience, like Michael said, this is where it would be a good idea to expand on relevant courses. Talking about projects that you did during classes, long-term projects, group projects, things that relate to actuarial science or to the finance industry in general, and that show some kind of skill that you have. Maybe it's a teamwork skill or leadership skill, or even a technical skill, some kind of programming. Those are good alternatives if you don't have a lot of job history. Now, if you do have past internships or job experience in the finance industry or math or just general actuarial related, then you definitely want to highlight that on your resume, put it in the top half, and for that you want to include your job title, the company that you worked for, the dates that you were employed there, and of course if you are still employed there, it would be from whenever you started to the present. And then you want to just give a couple of quick, concise bullet points on what you did while you were there, what you accomplished. So that could be projects, responsibilities that you had, or simply the skills that you gained on the job there. The key thing here is that you want to explain how you added value to the company and overall what you got out of it that you could bring to a future job. So one quick way to do that is to quantify your accomplishments. Now here I have an example. This is a condensed example from just a simple explanation. So when trying to decide what you want to include, a good idea is to just talk through, explain what you did in a few sentences. So when I did this one, I said I worked on a project to streamline the life insurance pricing process. In this project, we were able to decrease the pricing runtime from 4 hours to 1 hour. So then I went through and I highlighted the key terms in there. So for me, I like the word streamlined. It shows that we improved it, and it's a strong verb. And then the key terms of what I did, a life insurance pricing process. And what do? We decreased the runtime, and then I can quantify it by saying we decreased it from 4 hours to 1 hour or down 3 hours. And that's how I got my final example here for what you'd include in a resume. Moving on, we'll next talk about leadership experience. So leadership experience can be anything from actuarial club to campus involvement to off-campus involvement, volunteer work, scholarships, awards. Anything that you think will demonstrate a strong skill that you have or something that you've accomplished. And once again, it's great if you can quantify these results. When you list these on your resume, make sure to denote your membership type. So think of this as a replacement to a job title. Instead, you would say you were a vice president or a member of this organization, and the dates to which you were, of course, in that organization. Then you would move on to say what you accomplished or what you did. Especially if you're listing that you were a member of an organization, it's a good idea to talk about what you accomplished either individually or as a group. My examples here are, first, organized an event that raised $1,000 for the Make-A-Wish Foundation. All right, so that's a simple example of something that you accomplished and gives you a quantification of that accomplishment. If you were a member of an organization and maybe you weren't in charge of it, maybe you worked on the project, though, or assisted with it or helped follow through, still make sure you include those types of things, because even if you weren't leading it, the fact that you were a part of the team and helped out always looks good on a resume. And then my second example was created a campus recruitment strategy that increased club membership by 40%. So in this case, it's not a very specific monetary amount that you can quantify, but it's just a general trend. You know, they increase the number of people in their chapter of a club. All right, and then we can move on to our optional sections of a resume. So these are sections where you don't have to have them in your resume, but if you have extra space or you have skills that fall into one of these categories that really showcase your skill set or your personality, these are the types of things you want to include in a resume. The first thing is relevant skills. So technical and soft skills. Now here in actuarial science, or as an actuary in general, programming knowledge or knowledge of software that actuaries use on a regular basis, such as SQL or Excel, are great to include on a resume. But you need to be careful with that and make sure you are honest about your level of understanding with these, whether you've only just been exposed to it or if you have experience using it, because if you include it on your resume, expect to be asked about it. For soft skills, in general, you want to be careful listing them just as a skill. So you do not want to list on your resume that you are hardworking or that you are organized. You want to demonstrate those. Give an example of a project you worked on where you exuded those competencies. But there are some that can be included on a resume, something like a second language. Those are good to list as themselves, and once again, what's your level of proficiency. Next, volunteer experience. Just like relevant coursework, if you don't have a lot of on-the-job work experience, but you've done quite a bit of volunteer work, it's a great section to have in your resume. You'll need the same kind of information as you do for a job. If you had a title, where it was, what dates you worked there, what kind of projects and accomplishments did you have while you were there. This is also a great way to differentiate yourself, give you and a future recruiter something to talk about right away, something they can relate to. And finally, the objective statement. Now, this is not necessary, and many people leave it off their resumes, and that's perfectly reasonable. If you do want to include it on a resume, one thing I would recommend to include on there is what kind of job are you looking for? Are you looking for an internship or for full-time employment? It makes it a lot faster for those reading through resumes to make sure they have you in the right pile and considering you for the right jobs. And with that, I'll hand it over to Barry.
Hi, yeah, my name is Barry Ostman, and if you look at the WebEx, it says Walter Ostman. That's me. Basically, I'm a hiring actuary here at Lincoln Financial Group, and so I've gone through dozens, if not hundreds, of resumes over the time, and I'm going to kind of talk about what are some writing tips and basically what stands out to me when I look at a resume. One thing is keep it to one page in length. Now, if you have a lot of experience and you've been in the market for a long time and you've been an actuary for many years and such, you might go to 2 pages, but the vast majority of the young people that are coming out of college don't have all that much experience, and 1 page is just sufficient. And I, to be quite honest, probably wouldn't read the 2nd page if I were reading one. I would just probably go to the first main page and hope that the vast majority of the information is there. The other things are you want to keep some things just standing out, just bold or easy to find. And those are things like number of exams passed. That's critical. I mean, I segregate my resumes out by number of exams passed and GPA. Those are 2 of the major categories. And I will do my first rush through a packet of resumes and sort them out by those 2 factors alone. Then what I will do is for those that have higher GPAs and have the sufficient number of exams passed, usually 1 exam pass for an internship I like to see, 2 for a entry into the job market. And so after I do that, then I start looking for experience, some internship experience. And if they've, if you're going for an intern position, then I wouldn't expect much, if any, internship. But if you're coming in for a full-time position, then I would want some internship experience, either that or some other experience in a financial institution or some other professional type of experience. So those are the things that just make it easy and clear and fast and simple for us readers of the resumes to find those things. The next thing I'd like to talk about is play to your strengths. Basically, what you want to do is sell yourself. Try to pick those things that are important, that you think the employer would find important to know about you, and play those up. But be concise. You don't want to be too wordy. You want your resume to be clean, easy to follow, easy to read, but definitely pick the things that best portray yourself in the best light. Let's see, soft skills. Don't just, I think Tiffany mentioned, don't say, hey, I'm a great leader. Tell us how you're a great leader. What did you do that was in a leadership type role that made your leadership skills stand out, that sort of thing. So when you talk about soft skills, just elaborate more in specifics of how those soft skills actually were done and utilized in either your profession or your career. I mean, career, that's probably exaggerated, but in your prior employment or in your school involvement. The next thing I would like to talk about is word choices. And this is getting on the pickier side. There's some things that just stand out that you need to make sure that are clear and obvious, like we talked about before, which is your your GPA and your number of exams passed. But I would recommend you avoid the past tense, passe verbs like worked on or participated, and use more of the action type verbs of I improved or I achieved, I resolved, those kinds of things. Also, you might avoid some words like successfully. Well, we're going to presume that you were successful in doing something, otherwise you probably would not have put it on your resume. Those, you know, and attended, that's just kind of just not an extra word that just doesn't add a lot of value. Pick your words very cleanly and smartly and concisely. Avoid vague words like get-together, go-getter, and hard worker. Again, if you want to talk about your soft skills like you're a hard worker, then, you know, hey, put in a lot of extra effort in this job accomplishing this task kind of thing. So you're really kind of getting specific on how you are a hard worker and how that related to your prior experience. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Brett. Brett's going to share some resumes with you, one he thinks is a good one and one that he thinks is not so good, and try to convey what some ideas are how to improve them. So, Brett?
Thanks, Barry. Like Barry said, I'm going to kind of show you a couple of resumes here. The goal of this is just we've kind of taken all of these different guidelines and tips and how should a resume look, and let's now apply it. How can we take a previously, you know, maybe not so good resume, a bad resume is what I put on the screen, and then turn it into a good resume. And so we're just going to go through each of these resumes, the transformation from one to the other. So starting out, it's just even the header. You know, the header is important. It's the first thing the reviewer is going to look at, the manager is going to look at, and you want that to be clean and look professional. You'll notice from the left to the right, the left side, the bad resume, it's not bolded, it's not center aligned. When you move it to the center, it just kind of fills the page up better. We also see the email isn't as professional. As was mentioned before, we want a professional email. Just makes you look like you're serious about getting a role here and not just sending this employer resume. So we want a professional email used. So just those are some quick, but just still important tips to put on your resume. And I guess just even highlighting in general, this process is a lot of these are probably small changes you'll be making to your resume. You're not a complete overhaul, but these small changes could be the differentiator between someone liking your resume and somebody not. So, and then just even next with this here, you'll notice there's no objective statement on this email or on this resume. And as was mentioned before, we believe that's not necessarily necessary. For the most part, whoever you're sending a resume to will know what you're applying for, whether it's an internship or a full-time experience. So in this case, we decided not to include it, but you may include it if, say, you're going to pass your resume to a family friend and they're going to pass it on to an employer, and they may not be sure right away what you're applying for, but in general, probably not necessary. We'll keep moving. So the next portion is actuarial exams. As Barry mentioned, actuarial exams are one of the key differentiators for candidates for a job. So on the left, it's just one little bullet line here, exams pass fee. So this is under the, they just put it under the education section. And you'll look to the right side, and we completely blew out that section to its own section, actuarial exams. It's the first part of the resume too, so obviously the reviewing manager is going to go top to bottom. They're going to start from the top, and that's, as they go, whatever they see is going to determine their interest, whether or not they'll keep going. So we want to show them first and foremost actuarial exams, one of the most important parts of a resume. So on the right side, we noticed they put exam P, they passed, which was on the left side, but they also included it's exam 1 and P. So depending on which society you're taking exams for, this one applies to both of them. We also included the date it was took, just give some reference for the manager as to when they last took their exam, and then also included the next exam you're sitting for. So in this case, they put exam 2 FM is what they're going to be sitting for in the fall of 2016, and that's just good to put, even if you're not 100% sure and haven't signed up yet. It's just good to show some goal planning and planning ahead, just to show that, hey, I'm serious about my actuarial career and I'm already thinking about my next exam. That'll just something that'll resonate with a hiring manager. And then lastly, we put all VEE requirements completed on graduation, and the relevant coursework, which we'll get to in a second. They listed those courses, but I think it's more important to put that under this actuarial exam section. Again, just solidifying to the hiring manager, okay, this person is serious about getting there, getting through their the exam process, and they've already gotten their VEE requirements. So just some quick highlights there with actuarial exams. We'll move on to the education section. So again, actuarial exams is very important. Your education is very important. Probably for a lot of you, if you're going for an entry level or even an internship in actuarial science, you probably don't have a lot of experience related to actuarial science. So your education is very important just to kind of set you apart from other candidates. And so both of these are pretty similar. University of Connecticut. But then you notice from the left one, just put there's no date. The only date there is when they're going to graduate. But if you notice to the right, they put the specific dates they were enrolled. And this just gives not going to be the major differentiator, but just gives some clarity to the hiring manager as to when you attended school, when you got your degree. Maybe you have a master's science and actuarial science you're going for. It's good to include that too, but this candidate didn't have it. And then also you'll notice on the right one we have kind of one column for part of the information, the right kind of section also for information. This just kind of fills out the resume more. Less white space you have, sometimes the better it can look. Just looks more filled out, more qualified maybe even. So that's important. And then we bolded. You'll notice from the left to the right, the GPA on the left is not bolded, and then we move to the right, and the GPA is bolded. And this just, again, the GPA is very important for a hiring manager, and so they want to be able to see that very easily. And so the right one clearly does that. We'll keep moving to the relevant coursework, and so this would be courses you took while you're in college. You notice from starting with the left, we just listed out the courses, didn't explain what we did in any of those courses, just said I took this course, this course, this course, and this course, which is good, but taking a course is relative. What did you actually do in those courses is what can be more important. So on the right, we just focused on one of those courses, probability and statistics class, and said Bob worked on a regression analysis project using the statistical software to complete a project. And that is just showing the employer or the hiring manager, hey, this candidate clearly applied what they learned to a project they worked on. Hopefully they can do that, working at the company I'm at. And so again, just practically showing, taking the knowledge you've learned and having an opportunity to apply it, and just showing that on the resume. The hiring manager is not going to know that unless you put that on there. So just another, some differences between the left and the right. Moving on. So this is more of a arrangement of the resume. So we noted that education is important, or excuse me, actuarial exams is important, education is important, as well as professional experience. So you kind of want to list them in that order, ideally. And so we took the activities and clubs, you'll notice to the left, and move that below the professional experience section, so moving the professional experience section above the activities. And this is just, a small change, but again, the hiring manager is going to look through the resume, and if they don't like what they see after maybe a few different lines, they might just move on. And so you want to kind of list what's most important in their eyes in that sequence. So just kind of listing that. Just the way in which you even organize it is important. Just is kind of the summation of this kind of change here. So we'll kind of move on to individually into these areas, activities and clubs. This is a pretty small change. You'll notice they look pretty similar from the left one to the right resume, but just in the right one, we actually Bob actually lists what he did as a part of this club. He implemented a study group for students to study for an exam, and again, just showing what you did as a part of this club as opposed to just saying I was a part of this club, kind of a thing. Next is professional experience, so an important section of the resume, whether you have actuarial experience or not. So for this candidate, they had actuarial internship with Ullman Insurance and Associates in Poughkeepsie, New York. You notice on the left side, they don't list it's an actuarial internship. They don't list where it's at. And the location maybe isn't as important, but it could be if it's a smaller company. If certain companies have the same name, they might be, the employer might not recognize which company it actually is. So it's just good to be clear about, what you did and where you were at. And so you'll notice that from the left to the right. And then digging down even further into the details, you'll notice starting with the actuarial internship, the language used. So as opposed to the first bullet point, you'll notice on the left, says assisted with a project. Or on the right, we say, instead of just assisting with a project, we developed a new pricing spreadsheet that now incorporates dependent life and AD&D products. So as opposed to just saying I helped with it, you're saying the value you added to the given project. So again, just helping the hiring manager know, okay, what did this person specifically do as a part of their role, and what did they accomplish? Just that more active, those more active verbs are just going to be more helpful for that hiring manager. And then the second bullet point is just the same, and then we'll move to the next professional experience. In this case, it wasn't related to actuarial, wasn't even related to business, but it was just kind of a general sales clerk role at Walmart. Listing this on the resume, you'll notice from the left to the right, put the location, as well as you'll notice that, and this goes for the internship as well, that they're all in the same line, and that just kind of gives some more space for you to add more to your resume. So that's just another key point there. But with the Walmart one, just a couple minor details, but as opposed to develop good communication skills, well, of course, if you're developing communication skills, you've got to put it down if it's good. So just delete that word for the first line. And for the second line on the left, we say organize shelves neatly, to be neat and organized. Or on the right, okay, how do they impact the people they're serving, the customer? So on the right, we put organized products to improve customer experience, or excuse me, customer convenience and accessibility. So again, just kind of showing throughout the professional experience, it's just important to show what you did, or excuse me, tell what you did as opposed to show what you did. So, or excuse me, show what you did as opposed to tell what you did. So moving to the relevant skills section of this resume, not very much changes here. The first bullet point you'll notice is the same, proficient in Excel and VBA. But then on the next bullet point, as I was talking about earlier, you can list maybe languages you're proficient in. It's important to maybe use a professional standard. And so what we kind of addressed was it's good to use, maybe LinkedIn is a good example. They kind of have very clean and cut ways in order to differentiate your proficiency in a language. And so for the left, there was no kind of professional standard. For the right, we said limited working proficiency, just giving the employer an understanding of the expertise in that area. And then lastly, exposure to R. So on the left, don't write about exposure to R, statistical software, but on the right, we do. And again, just it's good, as was mentioned before, it's good to highlight and be honest with how good you are at these things, because a manager may ask you a question about what you know, and if you can't answer his question, that doesn't look very good in an interview. So you want to be upfront and straightforward with what you've seen and what you're capable of doing. And then lastly, just the volunteer experience portion. Not much different here. The only difference here was just listing the location of the experience. And again, just being more clear about where you were and what you did just gives the hiring manager better clarity into the resume. So these are just all kind of high-level ways in which to, again, are small, but it'd be important ways to change your resume to kind of differentiate yourself from other people, even though, this is the same person, same experiences, same everything, from one resume to the next, but one looks a lot better than the other. So that concludes the material portion of our presentation. The next portion we'll move on to is questions that people have.
I'll just say one thing, is I'm one of those hiring managers that ask about SQL and VBA. Somebody puts it down, I always ask them, all right, so tell me some simple SQL statements, or how do you join two tables, or that sort of thing. So just as a note, if you do put something on your resume and you say you're proficient at it, then make sure you're proficient, But if you've been exposed to SQL, then you probably just want to say that you've been exposed to it and had some, coding experience with it, but you're not quote unquote proficient possibly. So, but yeah, I'm sorry I interrupted. Are there any questions from the group?
Feel free to unmute your phone or to type to us in the chat box, and we can answer questions now. If you don't have any questions, we can start maybe talking about some things that we've either done on our resumes or seen that either wasn't good or was very good that would be good to mention. I know actually some of the examples from this presentation were mistakes that I had personally made in resumes, and I brought up to the group to make sure we mentioned. The first, of course, being something like a professional email address. It's important to not use something maybe you made in elementary school that has a silly name in it, but also to remember that you should be able to access this email address. So if it is one through your school, make sure that you'll be able to access it after graduation if you are close to it, because you never know when someone's going to respond. It may be within a few weeks or it may be within a few months, but making sure you get that communication is very helpful.
I have a question. Hello?
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah, so my GPA is at a 3.0, a little bit over. Should I put that on my resume? Because it's very close to it. And I know different companies, they look at GPAs that's like around 3.4, 3.5, stuff of that nature. But I do have 3 exam passed, so I don't know exactly should I put it in my resume or not.
I would say so. My gut, and this is Barry, I usually look at anything over a 3, and then I would look at exams passed, and the fact that you've passed 3 exams tells me that you're invested into the actuarial career and have taken the time to study for the exams and such. If you passed 3 exams and you had a GPA, say like 2.5, then I would try to explain why you had a 2.5. Was there a bad year or something? But I think a 3 or slightly over 3 is a good GPA.
An important thing to remember is that if you do not include your GPA, you will be asked about it in every interview that you have. So it's best to include it, and then if your major GPA or your maybe years other than freshman year GPA is higher, I would include that as well. That gives you good talking points and a quick way to explain why maybe your overall GPA isn't as high as you'd like it to be.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Any other questions?
I actually have another question.
Sure, sounds great.
Since I do have 3 exams passed, should I take my 4th one because I'm still having problems finding a job, or should I just keep searching with the 3 exams? Because I know different companies or different people tell me different things as far as should I wait or should I continue?
Oh, I would not slow down from taking exams. That's my personal opinion. I mean, this exam process is a long process and takes a lot of effort, and so while you're looking for a position, I would continue sitting for exams. That's my advice. I don't know, what does the group think?
If your situation allows you to continue exams without hampering your job search, then I think it's a great idea. If you want to solely concentrate on the job search, then maybe just studying and putting off the sitting to a later date is another option, but it's really going to depend more about your circumstances, I think.
Yeah, that's good. Also, I don't know, for many companies, we do job fairs, Lincoln does, and we go to different universities and things like that, and a lot of that activity happens in the fall. And so, you know, you want to make sure that you're available to do the interview process at your local university with the visiting companies, and that's not interfering with your exams and such like that, too, if you're looking for a position.
All right, another great question. Do we have any more questions out there?
Do you guys have any like suggestions on career changes? I guess per se. I was an actuarial science major, but I graduated last year, so I'm a year out working as an underwriter. So I don't know exactly, does that take an effect on the resume or anything of that nature?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think I would limit my review of the resume based off of that fact at all. I would probably, at the interview, ask, you know, what have you been doing in the last year? And I assume that you probably have something on your resume that would describe what you've been doing in the last year, but no, that would not be a particular problem that I would have to see. Tiffany, do you have any insights?
Right. Whenever you see a gap on someone's resume, your first question is, well, what were they doing during it? So as long as you have a good response to that, then something like a year between graduation and when you would start an actuarial job is perfectly reasonable.
Yeah, I think as long as you're progressing exam-wise, or at least showing, you know, trying to sell yourself in terms of trying to gear yourself towards an actuarial career, I think it's definitely okay.
Yep, no pause for concern there. All right, are there any additional questions on anything we've talked about today or anyone's resume in particular that has a unique situation?
Yeah, well, if we haven't heard anything, I feel that we can conclude. If anybody wants to reach out, my name is, again, Barry Ostman, BARR.OSTMANN @LFG.com. Please don't hesitate to reach out, and if you have any more questions, go ahead and send that. We will probably send the slide pack to the IABA group, and we will have that distributed to everybody that wants a copy of that. I forget her name, who was in charge. Do you? Oh, yeah, okay. What was it again?
Kate Weaver.
Kate Weaver, yeah. So I'll make sure that the packet gets to Kate, and she will distribute it out. And, yeah, if you have any more questions, just reach out. And thank you very much for participating. And have a great day. Bye-bye.